what's the critical error most tired landlords make? Well, it's this. The rent is too low because they don't have accurate rent comps and they don't have a professional leasing agent. So they can't find the best resident who will pay the highest amount in rent. And so here is how I sell turnkey deals. This is just, I'm going to get into some more quick math, but generally a turnkey deal is sold at 110 to 115 times rent, depending on the neighborhood grade. So if the turnkey value depends on the rent, then the next question is, what's the rent? And then generally we have about a 90% success rate is that the rent is the Zillow rent comp plus 100. That's in St. Louis. And we're testing other markets to see if this holds. So the turnkey value of the house is the Zillow rent comp plus 100 times 110 is generally the turnkey price of the house. Now, how does that apply to tired landlord deals? Tired landlord deals are generally under rented. So the tired landlord rent price is the actual current rent of the tenant times 110. So when we're talking to sellers, we simply say, hey, Mr. Seller, the value of the house is dependent on the income it produces. And right now at your rent, the house is worth this. It's worth 110 times the actual rent. And that's the actual monthly rent. So $1,000 a month rent, the house is generally sold at $110,000. And then you might be asking, well, Jimmy, what about the wear and tear and deferred maintenance on the house? You have to account for that. So generally the tired landlord offer price is this. It's the actual rent times 110 times your worst case scenario, $10,000 make ready. That's your offer price. And so now you have to ask yourself, am I going to attain the forced equity magical 80%? And you ask yourself, hey, is my offer price 80% or less of the value I believe the house is? If the answer is boom, without the rehab, without buying, you still buy these house cash, but without the buying in cash and do a rehab, you've attained the holy grail of being into an asset at 80 to 85%. So you got to ask yourself, is your offer price 80% of the bank's appraised value? If it is, yes, you got free money and you got an infinite return like we talked about in the last video. So here's an example of this concept. This is 2507 Bouchard in St. Louis, Missouri. Here is when I first looked at the house and underwrote the deal, I thought the appraisal value would be around 155K. This house was awesome. It was getting $1,200 Section 8. But the actual rent, the market comp for the rent was $400. So it's all right, cool. This is another tired landlord who's made a critical error. The house is rented too low. So I know I could raise the rent and I know that I could get the house under probably at 80% of 55K. So step one, what's the turnkey value of the house based off this estimate? And I show you guys these numbers so you guys can do quick math as you're underwriting your own deals or taking a look at the deals we send you. So the Zillow rent was $1,400. So 1,400 plus 100 times 110, essentially 1,500 times 110 is 165. So it's okay, cool. We're in business if we believe this house will appraise at 165. Now, step two, what's the appraised value, give or take 10% based on the day the appraiser's having? Because sometimes they have bad days and there's a 10% variability. And then is the make ready less than 10K? So we went in the house, looked at the systems, looked at the kitchens, looked at the baths, and we're like, yeah, this won't be that expensive when this current tenant moves out, if they ever move out. A lot of these tired landlord deals, the tenant's already been there 4 or 5 years and they want to stay another 4 or 5 years. So with an appraised value of 165, what will the bank lend on it? So 165 times 80 is $132,000. So what's your tired landlord offer price? It's the actual rent times 110 minus $10,000 for a make ready. So 122. So the bank's going to lend 132 and I'm going to offer 122. It's like, we're in business. So if the offer price, like I just said, is less than the appraised value, less than 80% of the appraised value, you're in a good spot. So the bank is going to lend 122 on this deal. Your offer is 122 and you refi out 122. So at the appraisal, we were a little bit off. The appraisal was only 155, but we had some buffer room on this. So the bank would lend 122. Our offer on this deal was 122K. And so the buyer refied out. When I say our offer, I say me and the buyer working together. So the buyer was able to refi out 122. So he has nothing into this deal. He has an infinite return. And then a lot of people ask, why do tired landlords cash out? Well, a good answer of why they sell is they've already made their money and they just want to liquidate. And then two, their depreciation is up. So if they've held the asset for over like 10 to 15 years, they're not getting that great of a tax advantage anymore. So it's, hey, it's time to liquidate this into cash. Now, the bad reasons why they liquidate is they don't know how to manage it. They don't know how to find a good tenant. They don't know the maintenance is wearing them out. and they don't understand the 4 pillars. They think they're only winning in cash flow. They don't see that they're winning in appreciation, the ability to use leverage, tax advantage, and that the tenant's paying the mortgage down. So it's a complete misunderstanding of the 4 pillars, and that's why they want out. And so I call this also the Braveheart sale. Like when we're talking to sellers, I don't know if you remember the movie at the end with Braveheart, and they're torturing them, and the torturer is just like, kiss the rose, and all this ends. So essentially, that's what we do with tired landlords is like, hey, we're a team. We know how to manage houses properly. Sign this piece of paper, and all this angst and all the pain of being a tired landlord ends. And who does that advantage? That advantages you as the buyer, who will never be a tired landlord because you're using a team and you're using the Vreeland program. So that's a tired landlord deal. Think of it as an instant way to get forced equity and get cash coming in the door. So I'll see you on the next video.